Hello, everybody. My name is Jean-Michel Blottière, and I'm delighted to be with my dear colleague and co-president Katharina Tillmanns. Just to make sure that everybody is hearing us well. So I don't know, there doesn't seem to be a lot of people in the room at the moment, 10 people as far as I see. So I would say hello, everyone. Can you hear us? Because the problem of this...
Wonderful. Everyone can hear.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. So I'm Jean-Michel. I'm the co-president of Games for Change Europe with Cathy. We started Games for Change Europe more than 10 years ago when we met with Susanne Segerman, when we met with Alan Gershenfeld, and a few other people, Assi Burak, and more recently with Susanna. And as far as I am concerned, I've been working in the game industry for 40 years, almost. I started the very first magazine in Europe called Tilt, the first magazine devoted to video games called Tilt in 1982. So I was really at the very beginning of the whole game industry in Europe. And I saw from the very beginning, educational games and people who were willing to create games to have a certain impact. But this stayed this was not very visible for a very long time, and suddenly in the year 2000 we saw a lot of initiative happening, including Games for Change, including the creation of schools which would be devoted to video game design. And we, with Cathy, we met during the first event we organized in Paris, which was a small meetup, Games for Change Europe. And Cathy came as an attendee. We became friends, and we decided to officially start a non-for-profit organization. And as you can see on the chat, there's the reference of the website where you can find a lot of information about what we do and what we did on different programs. So Games for Change Europe, at the beginning, the whole idea was to bring together a group of people who were coming from different places in France, in Germany, in Europe, who were interested in these games for impact. And a lot of them were coming from the academic world, researchers, professors, educators who were teaching games or about to teach games. And there were a lot of people who were involved in what was called serious games. So at the beginning, it was unclear what would be the focus of Games for Change Europe. And with Cathy, we decided really to have a focus on social impact. And Cathy was at the time working with the Cologne Game Lab. And maybe, Cathy, you can say a few words about the Cologne Game Lab and why you decided to join this adventure of Games for Change Europe.
Well, yeah, hello from Cologne as well. Yeah, for me, Games for Change had a particular meaning since I was part of building an institute for video game education at the point of time where I was meeting Jean-Michel in Paris. And of course, all my thinking about bringing together my interest as a media artist and activism came together in the idea of using games for social impact. And this has been the segment that I've been particularly promoting within my work with Games for Change Europe. But what we've been working on throughout the past few years has obviously become more than just focusing on aspects of game design, but in growing the interest of the general public, of decision makers, for new ideas what gaming means, and that there's a difference between e-learning and game-based learning, because a lot of people still have the perspective of please make this textbook a little bit interactive and we have what it takes to engage young audiences. And obviously it's far more than that. It's thinking education from a different perspective and from a completely different point of view, and also establishing the character of play for an adult audience. And particularly in Germany, and this might occur throughout different European countries as well, but in Germany, the aspect of play is usually tied to something that happens in leisure time or for young children, and really bringing decision makers to a point where they can take games as a serious matter of education has been and is still ongoing a very important moment. A lot of people acknowledge the economic factor of games nowadays, and also have the idea that young adults don't respond to the traditional education very well, but there's still a lot of work among particularly the target groups that don't play themselves to really gain trust for this medium. And I think this is one of the most important aspects as an organization, that we can communicate this trust more than on the individual level, but we have a complete community and also academic and scientific proof that we can pull out and bring on to these decision makers or people who really want to participate in changing the educational system.
We had in the process, we have been experimenting, exploring and discovering what would work, what couldn't work. At the beginning, we wanted to duplicate this idea of a festival, trying to bring the European community together in Paris, and it didn't work so well. There were different barriers. There were the barrier of language first. So for the French people, it was not obvious, but for other European countries, obviously, it was the same issue. So it was not too easy to bring different countries together around different topics. At the beginning, we were structuring the festival on half a day about education, half a day about climate change, half a day about health issues, half a day about politics. And it was okay, but not working very well. And what we learned is that it was making more sense to develop events in partnership with local organizations. So in France, obviously, there were France and Germany were the main bearers. So in France, we had a partnership with some French university, Le Conservatoire National des Arts et Métiers, for example. We had a partnership with the National School of Video Game Design and local organizations who were interested in the concept of games. And then we started to organize local events specifically targeting the French community, but bringing, of course, international speakers. In Germany, we had a very strong partnership with the Cologne Game Lab, who became an official partner of Games for Change, and also with FMX, a conference in Stuttgart, in Baden-Württemberg, in one of the Länders of Germany. And we organized every year a series of talks about games for impact. And of course, the audience was more German. In the UK, we've been partnering with some studios who were interested in the concept, like Aardman Animation, who is behind the Wallace and Gromit series. And Aardman was always trying to develop some initiatives to encourage young students to learn animation and to develop things. So they've been very, very supportive, and we've been organizing an event in Bristol, bringing together different animators and game designers to discuss about animation for impact or games for impact. We did the same thing in Denmark in a place called Viborg, where there's a school for animation called the Animation Workshop. And again, we went to Viborg and we built a specific series of talks for Denmark. And so we are very open, and it was also one of the goals of this presentation was to encourage you who are listening to us or spread the word. And if there are European people amongst you, we are very open and very willing to explore the possibility to develop local events in different countries, and so if you wish to reach out, or don't hesitate to reach out to us. We also so this is what we learned and what we developed. Katy, do you want to add something on this part of the development of the creation of different events and festivals?
Maybe we can emphasize a little bit about how these collaborations, how these little events come together, because I assume a lot of people have the idea it would be very nice to have something in my community or in my country. And of course, we need to give them an idea how this could be happening. I mean, oftentimes there are organizations contacting us and contacting us as partners with the expertise, and they have the infrastructure, the rooms. They also have communication to their specific audiences that we do not have. And they ask us to build a program tailored to their needs. So this is a very common and very successful scheme that we've been pursuing for the past events. But of course, in some cases, when there's a university, for example, this university with a different funding situation and different infrastructure, it could be something more of a real partnership and not buying in expertise. Because one important thing that you might not know is that Games for Change is, for the most part, running completely on voluntary work. It's a different structure from the US, so we are putting in our free time and are happy to get back our travel costs or something like this, but it's not a paid participation. We are truly non-profit, and most of our speakers, for the most part, are voluntarily jumping in, and so there's a lot of hard work in this. So obviously we can't provide a complete curriculum and program and also bring in the capacity to manage the entire event. So it's really up to a true partnership where both partners can really be open what resources they have, what they can bring to the table, and what we can make out of this, and to be really satisfied in the end.
Thank you, Katy, for that. This money issue has been really a recurring issue for the last 10 years. We were hoping that at some point we would be able to convince significant players to invest, and basically what we saw in the US is that there were companies like Microsoft or the Knight Foundations and so on, who were understanding the importance of the movement and the impact, and who were putting amount of money which were allowing a whole group of people to work. I don't know exactly what the turnover of Games for Change in the US is, but I see that there are partners who can put 150,000, 200, 300, 500,000. In Europe, we never this. It was always extremely small partnership. You know, the maximum partnership we got was 25,000 euros from Ubisoft or from the Ministry of Education and so on. So basically it means that we have to run an organization which is based on depending on the year, between 10,000 to 50,000 euros, which obviously just pay for the cost of organizing events, paying a couple of flight tickets, paying a lovely social events, a lovely dinner to get together, a little cocktail and rooms and the hotel rooms for the speakers and so on. And this has been, we've been trying to raise more money, but we were really unsuccessful. A lot of people told us, but in Europe you have these European subsidies. Why don't you use them? And it's true that in Europe there's European subsidies, but these subsidies are extremely complicated to get. We need to put together, if we would want to get 500,000 from the European community, we would have to put together a network of 10 to 20 universities from 10 to 20 different countries working together. We would probably have to work for a year and a half on the creation of a proposal, which would be 300 pages, to explain everything what we want to do. And more importantly, the European community would match money that we would bring. So if you want to get 500,000 from the European community, you have to bring 500,000 on your own, which is obviously for us totally impossible. So we tried at some point. We even paid an organization who was supposed to help us doing this thing, and ultimately we didn't get the subsidies, and we had to pay the organization. So we lost another 20,000 in the process. So this is really what we can share with you as an audience. If you are interested in developing some activities in Europe, it's that it's really pro bono work. It's really based on activism. It's for me, it was very clear that some people go in the street to demonstrate. Some people create some petitions. Some people create games for a thing. For me, it was I play my part in this activism role by trying to bring together people who are interested in games for impact, and this is my humble contribution to the evolution of the global world situation. Also, something that it's important to keep in mind for regarding Europe is that the US are really the leading country in the matter, and we had experiences where we were able to bring some sponsors who were worldwide sponsors who were interested in initiative coming from us, but very quickly these major sponsors wanted to talk to the headquarters, wanted to talk to the big players, because they wanted to have a global worldwide outreach that we were not able to deliver when Games for Change US was able to deliver this. So in a way, very naturally, the budget which could have come to us were going to Games for Change US, and it's really what it is. It's just there's a real logic into this. But for us, it was okay. We go back to where we can. This said, there were always some people inside companies or inside organizations who were understanding what we were doing. A lesson learned really is that it all depends on one person in one organization. And if we manage to get in contact with the right person, and this is also why these moments like this are important, because maybe in the 27 people who are watching this session, there's one person who is willing to do something or interested on, who belongs to an organization who has the means to do this, then it can work. And we had this very nice experience with the Ministry of Education in France, where there were a group of 2-3 people who were really trying to push the use of games in the classroom, and we created this education seminar for 2 days, with 1 day which is really about people sharing, so it's more a 1-day conference aspect of thing, on 1 day of workshops where people are working together. And for example, we've been building a whole workshop day with educators and game designers working together about how to take a game and make it useful in the classroom. So how do we take an existing game and what do we have to change to make this game useful in the classroom by the teachers? And on the other way, how do we make how do we take a lesson, and how do we use the talent of game designers to transform these lessons? So it's probably more gamification in this case. I don't like this this word. Hello, James. A pleasure to have you here. I hope the funeral of your horse was not too painful, and very sorry for that. I saw that yesterday, and so we've been developing this initiative. At Ubisoft, there was somebody whose name is Olivier Daubat, who is one of the VPs of Ubisoft, who was very interested in what we were doing. And Olivier came to listen to one session, and then I heard that he was interested in talking, and I thought, okay, this guy is too busy, will just come for half an hour, give his talk, and move on. And he stayed the whole day, and at the end of the day, he said, Jean-Michel, what you do is great, and I will help you to build a file to convince Ubisoft to support Games for Change Europe. And Ubisoft has been supporting us, but not at the level we could have expected. They gave us 25,000, which was already a lot. And compared to the very little budget, it gave us suddenly some possibility to do things, but it was not the 250,000 or 500,000 or million that which would have allowed us to move on and really create an organization sustainable and with a group of permanent team. So this is where we stand. We also have been exploring dependencies, for example, about games. So if you go on the website on G4CEurope.eu website, you will see that there were a whole day devoted to dependencies, and so we brought together stakeholders, doctors, of course, game designers, journalists, representative of the National Syndicate of Video Games, and so on. And it was extremely nice. But again, when we came back to a funding organization like the National Center for Cinematography in France, which has a whole department to support games and games initiative, they obviously were saying, yes, it's great topic, very much interested. Here's 5,000. So okay, thank you very much, and we do what we can with this. I don't want to give the feeling that we are complaining at all. It's just, again, activism. It's oops, sorry, there's a plane coming right in front of it, so I will let Cathy take it from there on. Muted, Cathy.
For you as an audience to invite you to maybe come forward with ideas or your general interest why you were attending these panel, because obviously usually you can see your audience and we can directly interact with you, but at least in this case maybe we can hear comments. Why? What was your interest in joining this panel? Did we tackle the topics you were looking for? Is there something you want to contribute when thinking about Games for Change Europe? So yes, please share whatever you have to share about this. And in the meantime, so we've been talking we've been talking about the past a lot, and the structure that we've been working with, and the opportunity to build these micro events in very different formats. Can be like a conference or a roundtable, or very exclusive events as well. We have all the opportunities and different formats that we could discuss with you if you are interested in hosting an event or inviting us to participate in an event. I'm reading here a comment. Is a new European Games for Change conference planned in the future? We have suspended actually the idea to have this one big Games for Change Europe conference. Might be we come back for it in the future more on a digital base, because in our experience, this idea of having people from all over Europe flying in for a conference, even if there are very interesting speakers in Europe, it doesn't work like this, that people put a lot of money in travel costs and join a conference on on activism topics. That's just the reality. We have a lot of interest, but also each year we had people who told us, I can't participate because I don't have the funds. And maybe the current situation changes the whole thinking about events like this. But I think being together in the same room is still a very important thing, and keeping the small scale events and the really tailored events for a specific community or a specific topic of interest as our main point of attraction, and then maybe thinking of bringing things together in a digital event. This might be a future take on our activities.
And there's a question about, could you share a bit more about where the problem with funding support came from? Is the lack of recognition of the mission? I don't know. A lot of people are saying, yes, this is a super interesting initiative, but we have no budget. And it seems to me that it's nobody. They don't see probably the studios, video game studios do not see the business model behind this, and what is the interest for me. So we have to rely on people who have the vision and who can allocate a little bit of money for Games for Change Europe, the same way, in a way that we understand that it's important, and we can allocate some our own time to this, but without making a sustainable activity out of it. And also probably the fact that Europe, again, is very fragmented, so that we would have to discuss with each local organization, and that would be extremely difficult to get to know the people. And then we have really like the digital format. Yes, yes, absolutely. We all do. I think it allows people to join from all over the world, beyond borders. That it reduces the carbon footprint as well, which is very important. It allows people who wouldn't be able to travel, and so it's very inclusive. So we absolutely love it, and this is something that we can really develop. For us at this stage, I would say we need to feel some encouragement. We've been bearing the flag of Games for Change for more than 10 years now in Europe, and we didn't yet get the feeling that there were a group of people who were really behind us, who said, yes, we want this to keep going, we want this to grow. It was working for 1 or 2 years, and maybe 3, 4, 5 years, but after that it comes to an end, and we were not able to feel that. So we need support. We need support. We need encouragement. And this is why this panel is so important. And being together, being part of the festival is super important to us. I think the time is up. So thank you so much. We've been organizing Games Jam a lot, and indies, and yes, we did all of this. Happy to tell you more. Feel free to reach out. You can find the contact on the website. Thank you again, Susanna and the Games for Change team, and very, very happy to keep the conversation going. It's 10:30, time to finish, to wrap this up. Thank you for attending, and looking forward to continuing the conversation. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye. Have a nice rest of the festival.